Hi everybody, welcome to our lecture for Chapter 6 from Fullan. This is specifically looking at the principal and their role in change. So this chapter was authored by Fullan himself, and it really looks at the principal as the leading change agent in a school. One of the facts that you will see presented to you a number of times throughout your doctoral education is that the principal is the most important piece next to individual classroom teachers in student improvement. My research looks at hiring strategies and why you hire principals to invest in human capital management in the building level to improve districts. Because I believe that the most important decision that the superintendent makes is which principals they hire, and the most important decision that a principal makes is what teachers they hire. So I think everything goes back to human capital management, and hiring that proper principal really makes your school improve. So Fullan talks about overloaded principals, which ironically was the primary topic for my dissertation. I looked at principal stress and how today's principals really were overloaded in their roles. When you guys all take organizational theory, I spend 2 weeks really looking at the role of the principal and their task ambiguity and their role overload. But for now, realize that principals have a ton of responsibilities on their plate, and nothing is being removed from their responsibilities to offset the stresses and pressures they face. I think this is the biggest challenge facing our school system, and I don't see any tangible ways in order to fix this. But I think we have an overload for school principals and no solutions really in place to make the situation better. So, principal dropout. There was a study from the 1980s noting that in Vermont, 1 out of every 5 principals left the field after a year. If this study were replicated now, I would argue that it would be a lot less. Here's my reasoning. Principals are paid really good money in the United States. Whether you believe that or not, are they paid enough? I mean, I'd argue they could be paid more, but they are paid a lot, and people can't afford to leave the principalship once they have it. A lot of the times, principals can't return to the classroom unless they leave the district entirely, and once you've had that experience as a principal, going back to the classroom is something that's really soured upon. Retirement benefits are much better for school administrators than teachers, so you're giving that up by leaving the principalship. So, we live in a society where this is probably the worst job in the United States. And I mean that. I think being building principal is worse than superintendent or assistant superintendent because you're stuck in the middle. Some may disagree with me, but the truth is, it's a much, much, much more difficult job, and most people consider it to be one of the worst jobs in the United States. Most people do it for the trajectory. The number 1 goal people have of being a principal is they want to be central administrators. The number 2 goal that people have of wanting to be a principal is to become a university professor. I entered administration very young. I did not by choice, but I did. I would have had to stay a building level principal for 10 years to move up to central administration, and my decision was sanity and costs were not worth it, and it was easier for me to enter the university realm instead of dealing with 10 years as a building level administrator. Fullan will refer to a study called the Bryk Study throughout this text. When we have organizational theory, this is my required text for it. If you're interested in school reform, you really should read it in advance. It's called Lessons from Chicago by Anthony Bryk. It's one of the most important works ever done on school leadership, and it really looks over the reform of Chicago schools. The findings of what makes a good principal, Bryk found that successful principals operated best in environments that were built around trust. And relational trust was one of the biggest elements of your successful principals. There were 4 specific elements in the school systems of effective principals. They were inclusive and facilitative, the institutional focus was on student learning, they had efficient management, and there was pressure from central administration but equal support. What you'll find when you're looking at these larger urban school settings, that pressure element is there without the support. But what Bryk found was that there was combined pressure and support, and it made it much more lucrative for people to be school administrators. The next study that Fullan chose to examine was the McLaughlin and Talbert studies. They measured principal stress by the strength of professional learning communities. If you can already see in this class, Oklahoma State values PLCs Very, very, very much. You're going to have a class called School and Community Collaboration, and the entire class is going to be about professional learning communities and outreach. I am not 100% sold on professional learning communities being the do-all and end-all for school change. I get the idea, but I believe, my opinion, down at the bottom, I think that if you don't have good teachers, it does not matter how good your professional learning community is. Your PLCs will not work if you do not have good teachers, because the capacity that the learning community will have is only as good as the capacity of the worst teacher that's part of the learning community. So, speaking of capacity, the Newmann study really looked at school capacity and how to improve schools as a whole. They found that teachers' knowledge, skills, and dispositions were very important, which that relates to what I said. Professional community, program coherence, technical resources, and principal leadership all made up what made effective school capacity. We're going to look at each one of these. It all goes back to the teacher. If you don't have good teachers in your building, the students can't be successful. You have to have professional development that is specific to what the students do, that can actually improve instruction. If you cannot improve what a teacher is capable of doing, you will not have capacity, and I think that's important. And that's one of the big ideas probably in this class and in everything for school reform. Teachers, what they're capable of doing really makes the difference. Professional community does not have to be professional learning communities. It can be school, parent business, and community involvement as well. One of the things you have to do is solicit appropriate feedback from all stakeholders. This gives you the opportunity to improve performance in the school and allows you to build capacity as well. Program coherence is missed in high schools. And this is my professional opinion. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but here's what I think. If you're the English teacher, do you know what the science teacher is doing? If you're the music teacher, do you know what the math teacher is doing? In a dream school environment, all teachers should have to describe the programs that are offered at the school and what all the other teachers do in the building. We have this theory that we're going to talk about in org theory of schools as loosely coupled systems. If we are to get past this idea, then we have to have program coherence. It's the only way to fix it. Technical resources, you have to have access to technical equipment to do cutting-edge things, but you also have to be able to train people appropriately on it. A lot of schools in this region are doing this idea of this one-to-one. But if the teachers are not on the same page in terms of using computers and they're not trained, what does it matter? If the principals don't have any capacity, what does it matter? Think about technical resources in terms of expertise. You have to call on national leaders for professional development if you're already at your capacity that you have in your district or even in your building, which costs money. So you have to have access to those technical resources as well. Principal leadership has to bring everything together. It has to support everything, and you have to allow the principal to be the facilitator and allow good things to occur in the building. And if they don't, they're going to have that ugly smile on their face and be miserable and unhappy, which you know that they all are. So another important work on principal leadership came from Leithwood, Bauer, and Ridelinger. These were 3 faculty members from different institutions and studied New Orleans principal leadership. And I don't want to say that they were in the right place at the right time, but they were looking at changing schools in Louisiana prior to Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina happened, and then they changed schools after Hurricane Katrina. Scott Bauer is phenomenal. He's one of my favorite people in this profession. He's somebody that you really should look at some of his work. He's huge in organizational theory, and anything he says I take seriously, and I like the findings of his study. So they found that there were 10 specific things of 10 lessons of successful school administrators. I'll give you a minute to read those on your own. Here's part 2. This is a study that we'll talk about in org theory. A lot of this chapter really ties into work theory, which I think is good about it. But you can obviously look at this on your own if you have time, or you can visit the study in our work theory class when we get there. So Fullan will continue to say what I said in the last chapter when I was talking about high school principals. The role of the principal is challenging and difficult, but the focus is on different frameworks that can test for principal leadership and capabilities. For your dissertation, you could take one of these frameworks, test it out in your organizational setting, and determine the role of principal leadership. This is a potential opportunity as well. So we are almost halfway through the Fullan book. The next chapter looks at breakthrough components of the principalship, and it's fairly theoretical. It's going to be a good overview and introduction to professional learning communities. So we'll look at it, and then we'll jump back into the DeFore book. If there's anything else I can do to help, please let me know. We are almost at the halfway point looking at the Fullan book.